Hi, welcome to Open Door Yoga. My name is Michelle, and today we're going to be talking about two considerations when you're working with a student who has carpal tunnel syndrome. The first consideration is to think about reducing weight-bearing postures. When we're in a weight-bearing posture such as plank, downward facing dog, or even just hanging out on hands and knees, that can put a lot of pressure onto our wrists. And so while we want to apply some gentle stretching to the wrist joint for someone with carpal tunnel syndrome, we also want to emphasize the word gentle. And so the problem is when we're in a weight-bearing position, a lot of people dump into their shoulders and then dump into those wrists. And so the first cue you can offer is for your student to hold a little bit more weight in their core. But you as an instructor are going to know which students are going to have an easier time with this and which students this cue may not support as much. Another suggestion is to decrease the wrist angle. And so when we are wrists under elbows, elbows under shoulders, that 90-degree position, that puts a lot of pressure on our wrist. But if we cue our students to walk their hands a little bit more forwards, that's going to reduce the pressure at the wrist joint, or reduce the angle at the wrist joint and reduce the pressure on the wrist. If these cues are not enough, you may want to just reduce the amount of time that the student is spent bearing weight through their hands. So maybe they could do the same posture on their forearms. If they need to be up a little bit higher, you could do forearms on blocks or another type of raised surface. Or maybe consider doing some postures in seated and think about what are the key actions that I'm trying to get in the student's body, and maybe find a different way to do it because that weight bearing might just be a little bit too much for someone with carpal tunnel syndrome. The second consideration is use caution with mudras. And now this isn't something we typically think about. But for students who may be holding a mudra for a really long time, a mudra involves flexion of the fingers, right? We're bending into our fingers to bring our thumb and fingers into some type of arrangement that suits our meditation for that day. And the problem is, a lot of times carpal tunnel syndrome comes from repetitive finger flexion. When I flex my fingers, I'm using the muscles on the underside of my hand that goes through the carpal tunnel space, and that's what's causing that pressure on the nerve, which is resulting in those symptoms. And so we just want to be careful when we're having students come into finger flexion for an extended period of time that we're not causing extra pressure or extra pain. And so obviously, every student's going to be somewhere different in their experience with carpal tunnel syndrome. Some may not have any limitations, some may have significant limitations. So these are just a couple things to consider when you're working with a student with carpal tunnel syndrome. If you have any questions or any requests, post a comment below. I hope you have a wonderful day. Namaste.